So one thing I'll say a little bit about myself first. So I'm Leo Farias. I'm a founder and CEO of Concepta, which is a development agency in Orlando, Florida. We are around 40 people. Um, and this year, we've opened up a innovations lab that we call Embed Wild, which that's a lot of what we've been working on and exploring as far as UI UX. And I'm also a Florida RGDE. And since the beginning, I've touched on a lot of UI, UX, and so on. So always a warning, we're doing it live. So all the demos that you see should try to explain concepts. They're actually trying to implement or implementing these concepts, at least to explore. And one thing I'll just give a notice is that I just had a complete failure crash in the last hour, and I spent the last 40 minutes trying to recover a state of the presentation, which it wasn't the last one. So you add that to the mix. All right, so tell a little bit about myself, which I think is a lot of people here also builders, which is the first time I built something. It was interesting because you have an idea and you put that stuff together, and then you're like, oh, this is amazing. I mean, I love it, but you think it's a blind spot because you're the only one that like it. But then people actually do enjoy it. You are solving a problem. Now everyone wants this, but they want their own version of it. They want to improve it somehow, or they need a particular feature that they want to, continue to add upon in order for them to execute. So that's a great problem to have. One thing I like to say is that I do a lot of open source projects, and of course, no initial version is perfect, but I'll probably say that those initial versions they were the most perfect to me. And the reason why is because once more people get involved, you get a better understanding of the problem, but also you now spread too thin or try to solve the problem, and you don't have the footprint of like, how big of a problem is this across so many people? And this is what I call the everyone tax. So everyone tax is probably, it falls under the category of a great problem to have, which is, for example, I loved Instagram when they came out. I was probably using it, taking actual pictures. Nowadays, I can't tolerate it. To be honest, like I don't even know like where shorts are and reels are. It just like grew to be such a big thing because it's trying to be something for everyone, right? And that creates a huge problem that it just becomes very difficult to scale features. And then every feature that you add for someone, it also hurts other people, right? Because it creates more cognitive load in order to start making those decisions or seeing what the product is. So the one size fits all. So they're going to impose in, tax. There's a name also called interface stats, which is just like clutter features in options. So with AI coming along, there is a paradigm shift. So if you think about it, the first time I don't know if you open the terminal or you went your mouse and you clicked around, you probably thought that you are being really smart. But that's us being able to communicate with the machines, right? So I'll probably say for the last 6 years, all we've been doing is trying to communicate with machines and making it easy to communicate how machines communicate. Now with AI and natural language, it is the first time that I think machines are able to understand us. And that is a huge insight for us to have when we tackle UI and UX in the future. So this is an interesting research that came out last year. Intent-based outcome specification is the first new UI interaction paradigm since the invention of GUIs. So before you had to say, where's the rotation tool? So I can go ahead and rotate my image, right? But now you're going in and you're saying, rotate this image. So that is a paradigm shift which we have not seen before. So, all right. So this is already exploring some of these concepts. And again, internet slow and so on. But what did I do here? Pretty much what I did is I got all the toolbar, right? The first version of Word was probably the simplest. Nowadays, if you open Word, you know, it's very tough to navigate. I'll probably use like 3 or 4 features there. And then you see like, okay, Word grew too much. Now you have people like, no, I want the minimal editor. I want an editor that is very simple. And then you're going to go ahead and start using it. But within a few months, you're like, okay, it's too simple. I need a little bit more features. So if that editor is going to get success, it's going to start adding more features and so on. So the big thing that we want to see is not so much we're limited by features. Let's have all the features. But we have a system that proactively removes everything. So it's proactively removing things that are not important from you. So in this case, you have a toolbar here. And I'm going to go minimalistic, which that's probably like, so I just went from like Word to like an editor that you see. But it's not just about the amount. It is about also, so for example, if I use my editor, maybe I want to edit a big document. Maybe I'm just trying to skim over something. So even as a person, only because I like something certain times, I'm going to change my opinion depending on the task and the context that I do have. So if I want to write a blog post, it might look something like this. And edit is something like this. So what we're doing here is kind of breaking down what are these components, and I'll share some code later. What are these components? What are these like? How do we communicate what these components are to the machine, so they're able to contextualize with us. So I love this quote, and I think it meant a lot. For me, it meant something else. I'll probably say 4 years ago. But I think it's more true than ever now, right? So the best UI designs do more than work. They think for the user. And that's exactly what we're about to see. It's UI that is going to shape and is going to predict what's your next task before you ask for it. It's going to proactively be removing everything inside from you, so you can go ahead and be more productive, but also have less cognitive load. So for example, if you want to solve a problem and you have a tool, if a lot of your effort is going to try to understand the tool to solve the problem, you're losing the capacity in order to be able to solve the problem. So there's a lot of benefits that we might be saying. So that goes in where I lost my slide because it's incomplete, but I'll walk you guys through it. So I think going forward, we're going to see, and we're working on what I think is more of an intent-based architecture, right? So we're talking about like, okay, how do I find the rotate tool? No, my intention is to rotate whatever the image is. So how do I make sure I communicate to the machine that? So you can imagine that I have my user intent, and then I have the action, and then a system can have many actions, and then have the context. And the context, it could be a lot of different things depending on the system, from temporal things as far as like time, from location, from your status in your account, your states, and also your purpose. What's your desired outcome? So what we're going to see is like behavior is going to be, in my opinion, the building block that we're going to act on. So I think that shifts the way we build interfaces. Because it doesn't become about like, what do I see? You know, oh, I want to see my favorite restaurant, but I might see all because maybe something. No, are the behaviors that someone has, and when should these behaviors show up for me, and when are they relevant to me? Right? By the end of the day, they're just behaviors that are going to act upon the system. So here have set like a set states, if you will. And again, this is pseudo code, but the main idea is to start to shift how we think about things. Because at the end of the day, states will be, going forward, the state might be a lot. Sorry for you guys that I guess have your own state management libraries, but I feel like state management might be something that we care a lot less in the future, because there'll be AI will do a lot better job orchestrating states for us if it knows what we want. So design isn't crafting a beautiful button. It's figuring out if there is a way to get rid of the button. So one thing that I did so much research for, I've been doing so much research because we'll be exploring and we're going to be open sourcing some packages around that. But one thing I thought was very interesting is that I have a background in interactive design. The reason I got into development programming is because I had all these awesome ideas and I just wanted to build it. So all this great insight, great knowledge about user interaction, user interface, they're more true now than, again, they were even 4 years ago. So here's a very simple example that at least I face very often. My wife doesn't like it because I gotta keep asking what it is. But imagine that when I'm cooking something, most of the time I'm cooking one thing. But I have so many options of things that I might never cook. So for example, it's even like the popcorn button in the microwave, right? You don't use it for popcorn. So I don't know what you use it for. So you can start seeing the case where if I want to go ahead and do pizza, like, look, it's okay, you have 200 features, great. But at that point, I'm not going to care about any of them at that time, right? Same thing for cookies. And you start seeing that like it not only can separate those things and make it more distinct so you can focus on the task at hand so you don't burn your cookies. But also, it can start building, once you have the intent, the behavior starts building what is the next step for you. And is able to optimize for the particular system. So this is a simple case, and sorry if it's a bit too big, but it's just, the idea was just like, we have a screen, and this is a joke, this article here. But the main idea is you interacting with it based on what your needs are, right? So obviously I can say, no, sorry. As I mentioned, it's like half of the. So if yeah, so like if it's something that the chat is there just in order to like play around with like what intents are, and what this does is actually it doesn't prompt. It does not prompt the LLM. What it's doing is giving an LLM saying, within this context, within this need, I want this. Build the context. And then it builds the context to send it back to the LLM to then get results. But sorry, the demo here. So we're seeing more and more companies focus and invest on ephemeral UIs. And I do think that it's going to be like where we're going to be going forward with, because it opens up for countless options on how productive we can be on some of these things. So another quote: simple is hard, easy is harder, invisible is hardest. Aren't these amazing quotes? It seems like there was wisdom all along. Yeah, but I think it's you being able to be productive or be able to tackle things while these things being transparent to you. I think they're important going forward. So the paradigm shift is thinking interfaces, right? So that's something that I'll suggest everyone to start thinking about, which is when you start building an interface, what happens if the interface knew more about you or your intentions than it does nowadays, right? And right now, it can just be more of a productivity, a focus thing, but it can get to a point where it's making proactive decisions to help you. And this is a little bit out there, but I mean, where we are with AI, sure. I mean, we're gonna go out there. So I do think that we're going to a moment where the fact that we intend to do something when it comes to computing, it will become reality, right? So before, like, oh, I want to do this. All right, so I'm gonna do this and get this tool and get there and send this, that. Eventually, it'll be just the intention can guarantee that already happened, right? So if I want food and I say, oh, I want pizza, I'll just get pizza. Maybe the pizza is already ordered, already my way, type of thing, right? So the intention will have a lot more weight for us. So where I think Flutter fits within this, and I like to say that congratulations, I think you guys made the right choice. I've been exposed to so many frameworks, and I'll make it somewhat short to say the background why I think Flutter is so interesting, is that background as an agency, we always trying to be very efficient with everything that we do, right? So from Titanium to React Native to Xamarin to obviously Native we've done. We still do a lot of things like, in React Native and so on. But I remember that Flutter, I think it wasn't even version 1.0. I remember that we tried it out and we got just like an iOS version. And we just like, okay, it looks good. Oh, man, the animations are great. Now get the crappiest, everyone has that phone, right? Get the crappiest Android phone there is. Because at the time I was a CTO of a company, and our largest clients, as far as like audience, they were in Latin America, South Africa, and India. So we got like a really bad phone. And when we opened it, we didn't even tweak the UI. I never had seen something like this. I've seen the promise, but it was the first time that I saw it, that it shaped and it rendered the same. And I'm like, okay, there's something more. Now, obviously, Flutter at the time wasn't ready. We didn't even have web views at the time. But in a future where the UI is going to be essentially manifesting itself, the question becomes like, where is going to manifest? And also, can we create a standard for those things? And Flutter is I think is in a great position because it's in every platform, is in every device, right? It becomes it's one less abstraction for you to worry about how do we handle this particular case for this platform, right? The team at Google are taking the brunt of their work. So I'll open up for a few questions, but as I mentioned, and sorry for this, I had a hardware failure, I lost the presentation, but the good news is that, like, if you guys want, I can share some of the things or codes depending on the question, especially like when it comes to the schema base. So I don't know if I'll open up for questions or just go into. All right. All right. So one thing we're doing in here, the demo is a smaller version of what we're talking about. So within the next few weeks, we're going to be open sourcing a package that we're calling Muse, which is meant to be a intent platform. So it also ends up being like a server render platform, but the goal is to be a way for AI to interact directly. And I'll give a few things that we're working on. So this, for the demo of basic intent definition, it will have functions. And I'll explain what functions are, because when we talk about functions, we're talking about functions to calling, which there is some overlap, but it's not the same. There's a state, there's context, and there's a UI schema, right? And I'll put instructions, right, if I add more to that. So essentially is, as soon as I have an intent, what the AI is going to do, like, okay, what is the context? And the context is more something that is being fused together, like, okay, it's time of day, what is my status of a user membership, or my age, my profile. These are things like that. But also, it's aware of states. States could be, this button is clicked or not. That also gets passed to the LLM at that point. And the reason it does that, because once the LLM gets that, it's going to render your UI. It's going to do two things. It's going to assign values, but also it's going to pick state to select for the UI to render. So it's going to proactively say, okay, if you want to have a button, and the button is going to be loading, I'm going to take the loading state, and I'm going to apply it to the button. So the button now, the schema reflects the fact that the state is there. So the state is defined. And also functions. It says the button, when someone presses that, here are my functions. When someone presses, I'm going to go ahead and press. It's going to be the same there. So it's essentially like you creating a schema for everything that you see on screen. And the first thing we're exploring is creating a function where by pressing that, it sends the context back to the LLM to see what this next function to call. Because once you start seeing that, I think it opens up for these much more complex workflows. All right, so this is a very basic implementation here. So we have an intent controller. So the intent controller, one of the ways we're using is pretty much, the intent controller is how the user and the LLM are going to collaborate. So as I'm interacting with the interface, and the LLM also needs to interact with the interface with the system, the controller is what is going to help us collaborate so we're not dealing with multiple systems. So it becomes the source of truth during that particular intent or interaction. And you can see here there's like this is like is a very basic, just like updating its own states, and it's able to call the function, right? So one thing I'll mention here is part of the framework that we're working on is essentially we felt the need to build a lot of codecs, right? So the codecs are just pretty much like a standard for encoding, decoding. But this is something that is interesting, is that if everything that I see needs to be a schema that can be defined, and also that value can be is defined by itself, meaning is understood, but also can be encoded and decoded depending on the system. So part of the framework that we're building on Muse is essentially codecs for Flutter. So you can see here simply that we have essentially a caller that is being defined here. So ACK is a validation library that we built in open source. So pretty much it allows you to define. It becomes also a standard and open, like a JSON schema. So here you pretty much say, hey, I have a caller, but a caller can come in many different flavors, right? A caller, maybe I want to support a hex, or I want an RGB, so I can support that. And by doing this, now, I already have easy to completely parse and accept any particular definition of what caller is. Now, another one that I think it becomes a little bit more interesting, or not as common, I'll say. So one thing that you see here that we have even things like a Google Fonts codec, right? And we have so pretty much that was the first step that we're doing, because obviously we're doing a lot of work with Flutter, is starting to define all those things of how it understood, how it translates, how we encode, how we decode, how we can define them. And there are cases that we're seeing where, obviously with different LLMs or service providers, sometimes they have their own standard. So one thing that we're doing also is creating the schema converters, right? So there is a standard when it comes to OpenAPI, but also we want to be able to convert and translate these into other services. So for example, like in this case, Firebase AI. And the next thing I'll mention here, which is more of a and just keep in mind that these are more like concepts. This is not the final implementation. It's more of a POC. But here we have essentially a widget, and you can see it's very similar to a builder. And all it does is accepts a controller, and it gives some other controls, but also accepts a trigger. So when we're exploring, the reason the trigger is interesting is, imagine that you've defined a rule for the UI. I'll say, like, let's say car dashboard. And you say, okay, here's my context, here's my intents. Go ahead and build the UI for my car dashboard, and you can go down the road. But part of that, it becomes saying, okay, but when I go over 60 miles an hour, now the behavior changes, the context changes, it has certain importance. So it allows to tie the decisions from the LLM based on triggers. And another thing that it will be the next step is not us defining what the triggers are, but the LLM being able to select which triggers it thinks is important in order to accomplish those tasks. And it's really good because now we have a lot of local models, and some of these things are becoming much easier. So even trying it out with Gemma 3, depending on the size of the response, we're getting around 500 milliseconds if using memory. 1 second. Those things are only going to get better. So the ability for us to make these type of decisions are going to be very interesting going forward. Yeah, but I think it's interesting where we're going to go forward, and I know there's a lot of movement on the AI side. Not just like from MCP to models to local models, But I do think there's the next paradigm, which is the understanding of the interface and AI being able to interact with it, or making it easier for us to interact with it. So yeah, guys, if anyone does have any questions, that's it for me. Sorry again for somewhat like incomplete, but at least we had a presentation, so I was happy about that. All right, thank you.